Hello, my name is Siqaiyuk. I am going to read one of the short stories I wrote. It is a traditional Inuit story, and I retold it in my own words. Kumallat and his cousins. Chapter 1. There were three cousins, Kumallat, Asaluk, and Mirak. They were all very close to each other. Kumallat had his own wife, his own house, and his own umiak, a large boat. Asaluk and Mirak both had wives, and they shared a house together, and their own umiak together. They all helped each other during the day. They exercised and entertained themselves by displaying their athletic abilities to each other. They were all strong. When they went kayaking to hunt, they stayed as a group in good cheer. Now Kumallat had an old woman who lived in his house that he provided for. She had a bad temper. One day, when she was speaking rudely to him, he said to her, "I will not have any cross old crone living in my house. Keep it up, and I will kill you one day or another to have peace of mind." Hearing his words and seeing that he meant them, she behaved peacefully and stopped berating him. But she was resentful and ill-natured. She stayed up late thinking about how she could get revenge on him. She finally thought up a plan that she acted on. "I've been quiet now because I'm in such low spirit and full of complete sadness," she said, her eyes tearing up. "Why, Amau?" asked Kumallat. Amau means great-grandparent or great-grandchild. "From the day you were so kind and generous to take me in, I've been so thankful of you. I would never want any harm to befall you." Then she slowly shook her head from side to side as a single tear fell down her cheek. "What do you mean, Amau?" "Kumallat, I hate to be the one to tell you, but do you truly believe that Asaluk and Mirak actually love you? They are right now planning your downfall as we speak." He believed her lie, and this poisoned his relationship with his cousins. He now feared them, no longer spending time with them. Soon they came into his home asking him, "Are you ready to go kayaking with us as usual?" "No, not today. My kayak needs time to dry," he replied. So they both left without him. Kumallat dug up his tent poles from the snow after they both had left. Just as he finished digging them up, his cousins returned. The next day they asked him the same question again, and his reply was the same. "Come kayaking with us," they both pleaded with him, but he would not go, so they left to go kayaking without him a second time. After they had left, he gathered all of his belongings and placed them in his umiak. As he was leaving, he told the people who were gathered to see him off. "When my cousins return, tell them that I am going to our usual hunting spot." When his cousins returned, they were perplexed to see that Kumallat was gone. They decided to meet up with him the next day. They both kayaked to their usual hunting spots along the shore. There was no sign of Kumallat anywhere, no marks, signs, or traces of him along the shore. Chapter 2. Now Kumallat had a special amulet that was a seal skull. Whenever he passed by an area that had people, he would attach it to the prow of his umiak. The people looking out at the ocean would think that they only saw a spotted seal bobbing on the ocean's surface. Going past one settlement, there was one person who perceived that an umiak was going past them. The person pointed at Kumallat's umiak, shouting, "Look, an umiak!" When the others looked in the direction that they had pointed, the people only saw a bobbing spotted seal. By this point, Asaluk and Mirak were concerned about their cousin's behavior. They expanded their search for Kumallat along the coasts. When they eventually heard of the person who thought they saw an umiak out in the water, they knew that Kumallat had passed this way, for they knew about his amulet. Kumallat was determined to get as much distance between himself and his cousins as he could, so he continued to travel day and night without stopping. He became exhausted and decided to stop. When they came upon a well-populated place, he decided to stop there and join the community. He set up his house to rest after the long journey. There was an old man in the village who was busy building his own umiak. His hair was as white as an iceberg. With him was a young man with a beard. After Kumallat had stood next to him during the morning, watching him work silently, the old man presently said, I started to build this umiak before this young man here was born, and how am I only just about to finish the hull? Saying this, he tossed a broken shell that had cracked into the used shell pile nearby. There were many large piles of shells all over the place. Kumallat could see that the only tools available were shells. The old man cleared his throat and said, No one here even has a knife, but inland, away from the ocean's shore, there are magic creatures who are very rich and have many knives. Kumallat was very interested in this topic, and he encouraged the old man to talk more about it. Farther inland are the people who are half dog. They live in all their wealth, with many knives in abundance. I am of mind to go in search of them myself, said Kumallat. I'm afraid that'd be very risky for you. You see, even if others went with you, you would probably die. Many of our people have left to get knives, even in groups, and they have perished, for none have ever come back with any knives for their efforts. The inlanders are a frightful people. They cannot be matched in swiftness nor agility. Hearing this, Kumallat was not deterred. He began to make a new bow and many arrows. For the bow quiver he used sealskin. Having made himself a good weapon, he started off to find these inlanders to bring back metal tools. Chapter 3. Meanwhile, Astaluk and Mirak had continued their search for Kumallat. Eventually they had gone inland away from the ocean and found themselves in a large inland lake. They had come across the inlanders, but being cautious, they spied down into their tents from the top of a hill. They hid themselves, for night was approaching, and the inlander hunters would be returning from the day's hunt. As the sun was setting, they saw a man pass near them who was carrying a pack. Asaluk had his bow drawn and ready when Mirak whispered, Wait, is that Kumallat? Asaluk lowered his bow and spoke clearly, projecting his voice. Kumallat, is that you? Yes, it is, he replied. Since it had been so long, they were overjoyed at seeing each other and gave each other a hearty hug. Now that we have teamed up again, these inlanders shall fall before us, said Mirak. Why did you take off so suddenly? Asked Asaluk. I was told by Amau that you two were planning ill for me, and I became afraid, admitted Kumallat. They both reassured him of their love for him. They all waited for it to become completely dark. Once the last of the daylight was gone, they set out from their hiding spot overlooking the inlanders to find a secure spot for themselves. Near the inlanders' camp, just off the lake shoreline, there was a small island. Their eyes had become used to seeing in the pale moonlight. They saw that it was about a stone throw's distance from the edge of the lake to the island. The three of them stood on the edge of the lake, judging the distance. Kumallat was the first to jump across. Even while carrying a large pack, he was so strong that he made it look easy. Asaluk grinned in admiration. Then he jumped over the water onto the island also. Mirak looked at the distance he would have to jump over and felt dread. I cannot do it, he whispered. Both Kumallat and Asaluk gave him a thumbs up and encouraging gestures to jump over. They were being quiet, for they did not want to alert the inlanders of their presence. Mirak took a deep breath, then jumped across. He jumped a great distance, but his shoes got wet. Now that they were all on the island, they hid all but two of their arrows. They jumped back to the other side, and this time Mirak cleared the jump also, not getting wet a second time. They silently approached the tents, where the inlanders had gone to sleep for the evening. They cautiously approached the largest tent. I will jump up on top of the tent while you go inside, whispered Kumallat. Hearing him, his cousins both nodded in agreement. Asaluk and Mirak creeped inside. Their eyes widened in surprise, seeing an inlander up close for the first time. They saw the inlanders in the soft glow of the fire that was burning down. An elderly couple was in a passionate embrace, kissing. The inlanders had a human top and the lower body of a dog. Next time they go into a close embrace, I will shoot the woman, whispered Kumallat. The inlanders went into another passionate kiss, and Kumallat shot the woman with one of his arrows. The man let out a ferocious howl as Kumallat jumped down from the top of the tent. The inlanders, hearing the howl, started to come out of their tents to investigate. Kumallat and his cousins fled quickly, jumping to their hiding spot on the island. The inlanders were sniffing the air, and more were coming out of their tents still. The inlanders started to shoot arrows into the dark toward the island. Kumallat and his cousins would shoot an arrow in their direction, then duck down to avoid being hit themselves. One arrow whistled through the air, and immediately Kumallat and Asaluk sensed a difference in their cousin Iñupiaq. He had the misfortune happen to him of being impaled by an arrow in the throat. "Don't you know a spell to help our cousin?" asked Asaluk with panic, heavy in his voice. "Yes, I do." Then he began to hum a little, trying to concentrate and focus his mind. "Marie, Marie, Marie." The third time he spoke the word of power, Iñupiaq was alive, and the arrow was out of his neck, laying on the ground beside his head. With renewed vigor they returned volley after volley of arrows. The inlanders had used up their arrows in the heat of the moment. Kumallat's forehead had a deep slice from an arrow which was dripping blood, but it was not a life-threatening injury. Chapter 4. When many inlanders had been killed, the three cousins jumped back to shore and started to pursue the inlanders who were running up a river channel that fed into the large lake. The inlanders ran on their dog legs along the riverbank until they reached a waterfall, which they hid behind. Kumallat and his cousins now waited until they started to come out one by one. In the moonlight, they aimed large, round river rocks at their heads, killing the inlanders quickly. Once all the inlanders were killed, they returned to the camp. The few children left had run into the woods to hide from the intruders. Kumallat and his cousins marveled at the inlanders' furniture and admired the glistening pots of copper and storage chests with inlaid copper designs and copper handles. When they opened the storage chests, they found the softest skin clothing. In other boxes, they found knives with the most intricately adorned handles. The cousins took all the knives and as much of the other treasure that they could carry. Meanwhile, back on the coast, Kumallat and his cousin's family were often mocked. "Oh wow, those who go to the inlanders actually can bring back fine things," someone would say. When Kumallat's wife heard these tidings, she would rush out excitedly, expecting Kumallat to be coming back against all hope. The people would laugh in amusement when this happened. The people felt free to mock Kumallat's family, for they assumed that Kumallat and his cousins would die like everyone else who had ever left for the inlanders had. Even though the villagers mocked them, an old bachelor had taken his amau and wife and provided for them, for everyone considered her a widow. Now Kumallat, Asaluk, and Iñupiaq were returning to their families on the coast after their adventures with the inlanders. On this day, the community was mocking their families again. The old man working on his umiak sensed someone approaching, turned, and saw Kumallat and his cousins coming down a low hill towards the village. They had large sacks and were dragging many boxes on a travois. The copper handles and inlays gleamed in the sunlight. A ripple of excitement and dread rippled through the village. Kumallat entered the home of the old bachelor, finding his amau and his wife mourning his absence. "I expected to find you desolate, wearing rags, when I returned," he said, embracing his wife in a tight hug. "The villagers thought you all would die. The old bachelor took us in and provided for us in your absence," said his wife. "I must repay him for his kindness. Let him come and choose for himself which knife he would like to have for himself." At first, the bachelor refused to enter his house, fearing that Kumallat was mad and jealous of him. "Come in. I must repay you for your hospitality to my family," said Kumallat, loud enough for his voice to carry past the entrance. The bachelor entered slowly and sat still in front of Kumallat, fearful of his wrath. Here, take these as my thanks for taking care of my family in my absence." Then Kumallat gave him two of the most ornate knives. Kumallat, Asaluk, and Mirak returned to their old home, and their reputation as the inlander killers and metal knife acquirers traveled up and down the coast. They hunted polar bears as well as many mythical creatures. Tavra, the end. This story took a long time to write, so I'm very pleased to be able to share it with you. Thank you for subscribing, liking, and sharing my channel with your community. Watching my videos truly supports my artistic endeavors. For those of you who want to support me more directly, please consider buying my creations and artwork from Etsy and download and buy digital books from Smashwords, many of which are free. For anyone who wants to support me in becoming a full-time artist, please become a Patreon supporter and get extra perks. Thank you for considering it. Links, as always, in the description. Thank you for watching and giving me your support.